Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our January meeting of Schools Forum. For anyone who doesn't know me, I am Alison Coleman, the Chair of Schools Forum. Also present at our meeting today, we have Amanda Havers, Andrew Berry, Angela Ransby, Anne-Marie Price, Christina Lewis, Colin Shaw, Darren Woodward, Daniel Jones, Emma White, Gemma Morgan, Gordon Jones, Helen Phelan, Jacqueline Dyer, James Clark, Joe Headley, Julia Granger, Mike Quinton, Ashley Jacobs, Rowena Mackey, Robert Lenko, Ruth Coleman, Sonia Harben, Sue Prickett and Teresa Spilly. Welcome everybody to the meeting. We have had apologies from Councillor Debbie Richards and Maria Kemble, and Andrew Robinson is attending in the place of Stephen Dewing today. So welcome everybody to the meeting. And if we move on to the agenda, I think it's going to be, as you can see, quite a quick meeting this morning, but we still have some important items to discuss. And so the first thing we will look at is the minutes of our last meeting, which was held back in November, on the 21st of November. We can take the minutes page by page for accuracy and matters arising, please. If there's anything that you want to flag, can you please just call out to me? So anything from page 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. On page 10, there was an action for Gemma to share the high needs funding bands cut across different year groups, and this was circulated with the minutes, so that action has been completed. Anything on page 11 or 12? And as nobody's flagged anything else from the minutes, then I will record that they were an accurate reflection of our meeting in November. Thank you. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have the early years funding rates, paper B. So I'll welcome Christina Lewis to talk about this paper for us. Thank you, Christina.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Lewis, Head of Service for Early Years and Childcare. What I'm asking you today, I hope the paper was self-explanatory. I'm asking for you to agree the proposed funding rates for 25-26. We do, for the first time ever this year, the DfE has set a date by which we have to publish these rates. That date is the 28th of February. So I am hoping to be well ahead of the curve, because if we agree them today, I'm ready to publish this afternoon. The main points are that I am proposing that the local authority will further reduce the amount that we retain, but still retain enough for us to fulfil our statutory duties and to provide an, I hope, effective service to our providers. And we are keeping the supplements that we apply to a minimum. We do have to have a deprivation supplement, and we do have to have a special educational needs inclusion supplement as part of the funding formula. There are other optional supplements, but the Early Years Consultative Forum prefer not to use those, so that we can maximise the amount that we pass through in the hourly rate to benefit everybody. So I'm hoping that what we're proposing is agreeable to you. This model has been agreed by the Early Years Providers Consultative Forum, so they know what the proposal is that I'm bringing today. If anyone has any questions or queries, I will happily take them. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Are there any points that anybody would like to raise before we go to the vote? Gordon.
Yes, just a quickie. The agreed dates in paragraph 2, the agreed dates will be implemented in April 24. Is that correct?
Oh, that's an error. No, it should be 25. Sorry, Gordon. I don't know how any of us missed that.
Well, it would be nice if we were voting on the right thing. And the increase is, well, first of all, I agree with the Suffolk County Council's thing on retention. Totally happy with that. the increases are quite modest, and presumably that's about the modest money we're getting from the central government. Does that cover all the national insurance contribution increases, and certainly at the lower level? And are those people in the consultative forum, are they content with that?
Absolutely not. No, I think the paper says that they welcome the principle, but they still feel that we are underfunded. And you well know, Gordon, we've been trying to battle that for years. So no, I don't believe that the increase will cover the increase in costs. I know Amanda has a hand up to come in and say something. She may well be able to speak on behalf of providers, but to my knowledge and understanding, no, this increase won't help the providers a lot, but I'm passing through the maximum I can, and it is based on what the DfE have allocated us.
No, I fully understand that you're passing the maximum, but my question is, I mean, it's almost going backwards with the increases which are coming down the line on national insurance, etc.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bring Amanda in now. I know you had your hand up for another reason, Amanda, but you might like to comment on that first. Thank you.
Hello, yes. In response to that, no, it won't cover the increase in costs. The national living wage is increasing by 6.73%. So a lot of our staff are around that level or a little bit over that to maintain some sort of differentials between staff. So this increase, which sort of ranges between 2.4% and 3.7% on these rates, will not cover that. And then you add the national insurance increases onto that as well. So as you've already said, we are pleased that there is an increase, and we are grateful to the local authority that reducing their percentage in order to pass that through to us. But we are concerned, as I think was discussed at the last meeting, about the impact of these additional cost increases. And obviously we have no real control over the income that's coming into the settings now that most children are funded with these new entitlements. We haven't got any option, very few options to gain other income to top that up. And added to that, the recruitment issues continue on as well. But we are grateful for an increase at least. And I can confirm that the consultative group did support these principles.
Thank you, Amanda. I wish the news was better. I don't know what to say, really. We thought we'd hit rock bottom a few years ago, but we really hadn't, had we, in terms of funding and need. Emma, your hand is up now. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I just want to say I had a really interesting article from the National Day Nurseries Association as well, which I think was highlighting that we are one of, I think, something like, and you might know this, Christina, I'm not sure, but one of the 5 lowest paid boroughs or counties in the country, and yet our costs are the same. I mean, obviously London has a much higher weighting, but I thought that was really interesting, and I don't quite understand why that hasn't changed. You know, large rural areas, that it does make it difficult as well. I wondered if you knew anything about that.
All I know is that the DfE apply a funding formula. They have recently published a bit more about how they put it together. They evaded that for some time, I must say, but it is there now, the methodology, but it's still incredibly difficult to understand, and I still can't quite understand why we get the rates that we do. As we've said before, we always try to lobby for more. We always get our councillors on board to lobby for us as well where they can, but we've yet to see the improvement that we would like to see and we deserve in Suffolk.
Yes, there's no answers here. It's a very frustrating position to be in. Yes. So on the reflection and the sad reflection that the increase is not matching the increase in cost, but acknowledging that we are passporting, or the local authority is passporting, as much money as possible to providers. I'll now ask Jacqueline to bring up the, assuming there isn't any other questions, can maybe else put their hand up. Thank you, Jacqueline. We put up the question, which is, so this is voting members, all voting members for the Schools Forum. Do you agree with the proposed funding rates for 2025-26? And if you could vote now, please. Thank you, everybody. So it's all the votes are just coming in. We've now had 13 votes placed, so everybody is in favour. So that has been agreed. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, everybody, for your support and your understanding of our situation. And I will publish those later today, which I hope will enable the sector to at least plan what they're going to do for the new financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you. So we now move on to our next item, which is a verbal item. Mike, over to you for an update on the Schools Block funding formula submission for 25-26. Thank you.
Alison. Morning all. I'm Michael Quinton, a senior accountant working for CYP and schools. So what would normally happen at this meeting is that I would be presenting you the final schools budget performer that I would get off to the DfE, and it would have all of the schools block factors that we use and the rates that we use for 25-26. But this meeting has probably come about a week too early because the deadline to get this back to the DfE is the 21st of January, I think. So this is a little bit too early, this meeting, to have anything concrete. I'm still waiting on the boroughs and districts just to provide the national non-domestic rate information for schools, but the majority of all of the other work has been complete. So what I propose to do is to, as part of the minutes that Teresa will put together, is to let Teresa have the final budget pro forma, and she can then include that in the minutes. So you can see that, then you can share that with your primary and secondary phase contacts, and they can start doing that sort of early initial budgeting, which usually happens this time of year before we dish all the budgets out around sort of mid-February. So yeah, apologies for not having anything sort of more concrete to discuss today, but essentially there's been no updates from the paper that I presented in November. No real changes to that at all, apart from a slight increase in the funding that we got in our total DSG. So at the end of this sort of update, Alison will then ask for the forum representatives to vote that we continue to follow the national funding formula, which we have done for the past 7 years. So all of the factors will be as set by the DfE, and the only one that we do change is the ORPU figures, because as you know, we agreed to transfer 0.5% of the schools block funding to the high needs block to help support the deficit there. So obviously I just need to reduce the ORPU accordingly, that I can balance back to the total allocation that I've got for the schools block. I hope that will make sense. So overall on last year's allocation for schools block was 531 million for schools, and this year we've been allocated 567.8 million. So that is an increase of around 6.8%. But as we know, the teacher pension grant, the teacher pay grant and the core school budget grant has been rolled into that figure. So the majority of that 6.8% is from those grants. So it's welcome, because it means that we've got that funding in schools budgets for next year to fund any support staff pay increases, teacher pay increases, and any other pressures. But we know it's likely not to be enough, and we know that it's really difficult for schools at the moment. So on the back of that, what I will be doing in the summer term at one of our forum meetings, I'll be providing an update on LA maintained schools and how they're faring at the moment, so we can see sort of the level of reserves that schools are holding, any schools that potentially may be in deficit or are in deficit. And I think that would just be useful to give an overall context, so we can see how the 90 or so LA maintained schools are doing within Suffolk. So yeah, we'll be providing something in the summer term on that one. The other thing just to know is pupil numbers continue to drop in Suffolk. So overall, we had a reduction in the primary phase of 772 on last year, and in the secondary phase, we had a reduction of 218 pupils. So that means that there's a reduction for funding for Suffolk of just under £6 million. So that's funding that we're no longer getting into our schools, because bums on seats means that schools get that funding. I was reading something the other day from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, and the prediction is that pupil numbers continue to drop, which we're aware of, and I think we discussed this at the last meeting. So even if there's a 2% drop between now and 2027, potentially that's 1.3 billion, which isn't going out into the school sector because of those drop in pupil numbers, which is a huge amount of money. I think the government are looking at potentially using some of that to then invest into the high needs block. But as I said, I think there will be some consultations this year around various things around schools funding, and one of those might be around how we can support schools that have falling roles. Obviously there's those protections are put in around minimum funding guarantee, but if schools are seeing really drastic drops in their numbers, especially at primary levels at the moment, then there probably does need to be a mechanism put in place to help support those schools. So I think that's about it, and that's all I wanted to provide on the update today. But as I said, I think we do just need to agree that we continue to follow the national funding formula. And Alison, if you can take that away and ask for the votes and the comments, please.
We'll just see if there's any thing anybody wants to raise first. Darren has put in the chat, do we know what percentage that drop is for primary? Do you know what the percentages might be?
Not off the top of my head, Darren. I can provide that. That's fine. Yeah, there's lots of information out there at the moment around sort of reduction in pupil numbers. It's changing all the time, but I can provide that.
Thank you, and thank you, Christina. You've added in the comment that some schools with spare space due to falling numbers have applied to the DFE to create school-based nurseries. So that's something else, a changing landscape. Gordon, you have your hand up.
Hold on. Yes, you mentioned that there might be a reduction of 1.33 billion, which the government are thinking might be directed to the high needs block. But I recall reading somewhere that the forecast of the deficit on the cumulative high needs block for all the counties, I think it is by about 2030, but I might be wrong in that, is about 8 billion. So it's not even touching the size, is it? And do we have an update yet on the high needs, the deficit on the high needs block, which is currently off balance sheet and can continue to be off balance sheet until 2026, but no decision has been made whether it can continue beyond that?
I don't think there's been any decision as yet, Gordon, on that. That's still sort of the latest that we're aware of. That override will continue until then, and then thereafter we're not sure. So that is a real concern. I can see Sonia's now putting her hand up, so I'll let Sonia come in on that.
And it's the LGA, if you like, doing some action and also some contingency planning, because it's not that far away, is it, Sonia?
Most definitely not. Hello, everybody. I'm Sonia Harb, and I'm the CRP Strategic Finance Lead. So yes, there is an increasing DSG deficit. So Suffolk is likely to be will be over the 100 million at the end of this financial year on the DSG. What we do know is that the government have acknowledged that it's just not sustainable. The problem in Suffolk is we don't have the level of reserves that maybe other authorities have to offset that deficit. We are expecting that either the override will not end in March 2026 and it'll be sort of moved forward again. That still may not be that won't necessarily change the issues it has for Suffolk, because if you've still got that gap in your, in effect, bank balance, you have to fund it from somewhere. What I would say, though, Gordon, is that it's, at the very highest level with our administration, our Section 151 officer, it our highest risk really at the moment, and we continue to await for further information from the government on how the high needs block sector provision and funding will change over the next few years, because it's just not a sustainable position at the moment.
No, I mean, I fully understand that. I mean, it's not just an issue locally; it's a national one, and I suggest that actually some local authorities are in an even worse position than we are locally.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the problem is that level of demand that's coming in. We can, it's costing us from our core budget to increase our staffing to get sort of the HCPs and all of that and the educational psychology advice done. That's then a cost to us, as is the transport cost of all those additional young, pupils who are then eligible for transport for SEND. That can't be even funded from the dedicated schools grants. That becomes a core fund issue, as does the additional borrowing required to fund that DSG deficit. So it's a real problem for us in Suffolk, and I think it's just that, when is that increase in demand ever going to sort of slow down? We there's all, and Gemma, I'm sure, will come in terms of there's been Suffolk were below the curve in terms of our numbers, so we have seen an increase in demand, but it doesn't appear to be particularly slowing down at the moment, and we can't build or create places quick enough to support the additional demand that's coming through.
And I personally can't see it reducing, certainly in the short term, even the medium term.
Yeah, and even if we were to be able to reduce the level of demand or slow that level of demand coming down, you still can't change that gap between our funding and our spend. That's basically in this year about 50 million. You can't change that. Well, I'm not sure how you'd ever change it, if I'm honest. So I'll let Gemma come in.
Thanks, Sonia. I'm only just adding to what Sonia said, but you're absolutely right, Gordon. The numbers aren't reducing. The requests for EHCPs continue to rise on a monthly basis. The trajectory work, we've had some work done by the Information Hub, and the trajectory is showing that within the next 2 to 3 years, the curve is going to remain going up and up and up. We are trying to meet the needs of the children, but obviously that means we need more places within the local offer. We're looking at what our existing schools and providers can offer, but again, that comes at a cost, an additional cost to what we're already paying. And as Sonia said, we can't reduce what we're spending at the moment. We just need to look at how we spend our funding moving forward. And that is some work that we have, obviously we've been doing as part of the work we do around the deficit recovery. I mean, calling it a recovery is obviously not accurate because we're not recovering anything, but we are looking at how we're spending our money. Also starting to look at reviewing, again, with one of our new consultants. We've got a SEND consultant in who's going to work with me and my team to look at if there's anything else we can be doing to reduce our spend, or at least look to avoid costs moving forward. So the work continues, Gordon, and obviously we'll report back. The High Needs Working Group will be part of any work that we do moving forward, and we'll report back to Schools Forum. I'll be on the agenda in May, so I will be telling everybody about the position for the end of this year. We haven't got the autumn term data through yet, but we have seen an increase again in the requests for high needs funding, particularly in our mainstream schools. So it just continues.
Thanks, Gemma, much appreciated. And my comments weren't meant as a criticism.
No, not at all.
Far from it, to highlight the challenges that we all face. So.
No, absolutely. And Gordon, please don't think we see it as a criticism. We appreciate your support. And I think coming to this meeting is quite helpful, so people appreciate that it's a much bigger problem around the funding for Suffolk. And as Sonia will say, and has said at many meetings previously, our level of funding is not fair or equitable in comparison to our statistical neighbours. Sorry, Sonia.
No, that's okay. You carry on with your rant because I'd only join in with it anyway. I think, you know, I just wanted to sort of add to what Gemma said in terms that obviously we do have strict controls about spending. So it's not that the sender are just going ahead and spending whatever they like. You know, there are, and we are always reviewing those as well. And as a council, you know, with the work I do with our Section 151, we're always sort of monitoring and reporting on the impact and what impact that will then have on our core funding as well. So, as I said, it's our highest priority in terms of finance. We absolutely get that. However, the funding issue is a problem for us. Oh, I'm sure Sarah Jane's going to talk far more eloquently than me.
Sarah Jane, I'll bring you in next. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. And just to reinforce, I'm hoping what you're hearing is a real commitment from the local authority. We need to get this right for children. So I know we're talking about money. Getting it right for our children will help us to make sure that we get it right with the money as well. So all of the funding conversations, I think it's very helpful. We are funded in a particular way in Suffolk, and we're grateful, particularly to Councillor Reid, who is always championing us and asking at the highest levels that funding is considered. What's really important is, just as Gemma said, is we think about what our children need in Suffolk, and how we collectively can get in the right place to deliver that. So I'm hoping that that's very much what you're hearing this morning. Thank you, Chair.
And but before I bring Robert in, I think I'll just add that Sarah Jane, we were pleased to welcome you to our infant and school and nursery before Christmas. And I think you saw how hard we work to try and meet the needs of as many pupils as possible in our setting. But even in our school, we are still seeing an increase in high need that we are then seeking extra support from the local authority for. So despite what you saw as, I think, quite good practice, even in our setting, it isn't enough to meet all the needs of the children coming through anymore.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I can just respond to that, to say it was just so impressive to see what's happening in your school and so many other schools that myself and Julia Granger, who I know is on the call, have been able to visit. I think it just underlines the only way we can get this right for our children is together and keeping in this conversation. So it's just really welcome. But it's, you know, something that we just all need to stay really close to make sure that we do that. Thank you.
Sonia, you've got your hand back up.
Yeah, I mean, it's going back a bit to, I think it was Emma who asked the question before about the early years increases and that we were so low. So although we're talking here about high needs block and early years, whilst we were on the call, I was just having a look at the increases from 24-25 to 25-26. So as an example, like our 2-year-old entitlement, out of the 151 authorities, only 15 had a lower percentage increase than us. And on the 3 to 4-year-olds, it was a slightly better position that there were 45 lower than us. But you can see that even we started from a low base, and our percentage increase, I know this is early years, it's not a very different picture. I think because on high needs we were already so low, I think we might be slightly higher, and I'll have a look and maybe send those out with the minutes in terms of our percentage increase for high needs block this year. I'll just reiterate that our funding, a lot of it is based still on the historical spend. Suffolk were low, and we are still we're not sort of, you know, our funding is I can't think of the word, is not as high as it should be because nationally there's still a larger element of the budget that's based on what spend was in 2017-18. Now, if you think about how many years ago that was and the change that's happened in Suffolk over that period of time, that amount of money, if it was basically based on pupil characteristics in the same way, we'd have an awful lot more money coming in. It still wouldn't eradicate our overspend by any means or reduce our deficit, but it would go some way to not increasing, you know, and having a bit more of a handle on it, really.
We got the highest percentage gain that we could per head, Sonia, so it was 10% on 24-25 on the high needs block. So local authorities could get anything between 7 and 10%, and we got the highest percentage gain, which, you know, it's not enough, but anyway, just thought I'd let you know that.
Yes, when the whole ethos of the formula is wrong in the first place, when you're in too low a position, even if it's a high percentage increase, it's on it's on the wrong number that you're giving the percentage increase, isn't it? So yes, I think that's been really helpful. The fact that we've had fewer items on the agenda this morning has meant we've been able to reflect on this a bit more deeply than we often would. Emma, I'll bring you back in. Thank you.
Hi, sorry, and this might not be an appropriate place to mention it. I'm not sure, and I apologise if it is. Just tell me, oh, you can talk about it later. But I know that when we looked at the figures for the SEND, the transport figures were extraordinarily high, and I'm imagining that's because we're so rural. Are those means tested at all? Because I mean, for myself, I do know that some of my families, they're now getting transport to schools in Gloucestershire, and I know they could be doing that journey themselves, but they're not able to because the offer that Suffolk have given them it includes transport. So they can't even take their daughter to Gloucestershire once a week themselves either. She gets taken in a taxi by not only the taxi driver, but obviously then somebody else. And I'm just wondering, is there a way that we, Suffolk could maybe, I don't know, is that done by the Department for Education? Is it a standard across the board, or is that something that Suffolk could look at because we're so rural? Maybe transport is going to have to be means tested even for offers of SEND.
Sonia, I'll bring you back in. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. No, we can't means test. It's a statutory obligation. What we try and do is ensure that, what we try and work with parents and carers is that in the first instance, are they able to take their child to their place of provision? Because those costs come against our core funding, not the dedicated schools grants. They're not part of the overall deficit. So that's an additional pressure that's coming in. So as an example, I think the additional cost for us expected in 25-26, because the scrutiny papers came out yesterday, I think we've got about 3.5 million in. That's the additional cost we think it's going to cost us in Suffolk to transport those young pupils the pupils who, quite rightly are now securing a educational provision where they need to be. But whilst we are trying to reduce our costs by offering parents and carers, they are offered a direct payment to take their own children to school. But as you said, Emma, if you've got 3 children and they're all going to different places, you just won't necessarily have those options to be able to take them. So we can't means test, but we do try and secure the most cost efficient, but being really mindful there's always going to be some some children who will need solo transport, others who we will then look to see if we can have if they're able to move on to minibuses, or who can actually work towards independence. But there'll always be some who need that level of support that only a taxi or solo transport can provide. But that is where we've seen such a significant increase over the last few years. And again, part of that is because we're a rural county, and it's just such an issue for us.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma. Robert, you've got your hand up again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Morning, everybody. I can only admire the work that the members of SCC are doing. I just wanted to say, but specifically about Suffolk, I seem to remember, Alison, you may help me here, that when Adrian Orr was with us about a year or so ago, he said they had opened some conversation with the then Conservative government about the unfairness of the funding specifically to Suffolk. I mean, obviously, it's not going to make us rich, but it might make us fair. I wonder, since the new government has come in, if we have any connection at all still with the DFE about the specific unfairness of the funding to Suffolk.
Julia.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Julia Granger, Interim Assistant Director, Education, Skills and Learning. It's a really good question, Robert. And as soon after the election, our lead member, Andrew Reid, wrote to the new Education Secretary with exactly that point, to keep the profile of funding for Suffolk children, young people and schools really high on the agenda. And we continue to have conversations with the DFE, and our elected members continue to lobby the government on Suffolk's behalf. So yes, very much still active in that space. And in fact, at the same time as this meeting, there is a meeting of the F40 group, which I will hope to nip into after this one, where we work with the other local authorities who are equally low funded as well. So yeah, ongoing work there.
That's great news. Thank you very much indeed, Julia. Thank you.
Thanks.
And Robert, on the F40 group, I'll bring Mike in on this, he's got his hand up anyway. Mike and I both attended a specific briefing that the F40 group gave on SEND funding before Christmas. And one of the lead councillors there said he was feeling a bit more hopeful than previously, that government were now at least acknowledging that the funding formula wasn't there and did need to be reviewed, but they hadn't got as far as describing what that might look like yet. And as Mike mentioned earlier, we think government might be doing some more consultations during this year that might give us an opportunity to feed in again about the need for the funding formula to be fair and equitable. Mike, I'll let you add to it. You're on mute, Mike.
Sorry, I raised my hand and unraised my hand and then forgot to do mute, and I can't do two things at once, obviously. So what I was just going to say that we attended that F40 conference before Christmas, and also Councillor Reid, myself, and I think Gemma, I think you might be coming down. There's a conference in Westminster in March, a big F40 conference, where they're going to be looking at the SEND crisis and mainstream inclusion, and various other bits and pieces, but I think they're the key things that will be looked at. And I think it's a really important conference because you've got MPs there. It's a cross-party, obviously, group, the F40 group, but you're going to have the Secretary of State for Education there at that meeting. So I think it's a really good opportunity for like myself and Gemma to go down and actually really sort of lay the facts on the line to say Suffolk is low funded, and we can go prepared with lots of information, all of that work that we've done on our stat neighbours, for example. So we'll go down and we will continue to sort of fight for Suffolk in the events that do happen over the next sort of year or so.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much and good luck.
Gordon.
Well, I can remember attending some of those meetings a few years back, and I hate to say it, the same sort of I made the same sort of comments then as you're making now, and I think with the comments on the financial situation of the country currently, I wouldn't hold out too much hope, because there won't be an addition, there won't be massive amount of extra money, and we all know that once somebody has an allocation, they don't like to lose any of that allocation. So I wish you luck, but I think it will continue to be an uphill struggle. I mean, for at least 10 years, demand on SEND has been very, very significant, and will continue to be, maybe less significant going forwards, but still very very substantial. Okay.
Yes, it's a bleak picture at the moment, and we all wish we could wave a magic wand, but all we can do is keep chipping away, because if we don't try it, well, at least we have to say we're trying. Even though some of us who are getting a bit long in the tooth now have seen difficulties for many years already. So on that note, bringing us back to this item, which is about the schools block funding formula submission for 25-26. Can I ask, as Mike mentioned in his presentation, that schools forum members, could you now just put something in the chat, because we haven't got a vote lined up. So in the chat, if you are in favour of us continuing to align our funding formula submission with the national funding formula, could you please put yes in the chat? If you wish to add anything else, or I agree, if you wish to add anything else in the chat, then please feel free. But if you could at least say yes or no, so that we can record the view of forum members, please, for the minutes. And then Mike will finalise the submission and submit it on our behalf based on this vote. Thank you very much. Okay, so I haven't had any other business submitted to me for today. So we just have the forward agenda, which is paper C. And as was mentioned earlier in the meeting, we next meet on Thursday, the 8th of May. So having just got into the new year, we'll then meet again after Easter. So if nobody has any other thoughts on that, I don't think there's anything we need to say about the forward agenda. So thank you all very much for your time this morning. I think the fact that we had a light agenda gave us an opportunity to have a good conversation about our financial position, however difficult that is. So thank you all very much for your time, and have a good weekend when you get that far. Thank you. See you in May. Bye.
They really someone got opinions in there. I don't know if he's open to take them off. I'll get it. In the box. What to do?